Hey there, little dreamers. Welcome back to Cozy Tales for Sleepy Nights, the place where stories snuggle up with your imagination. Grab your favorite blanket, maybe a snack, and let's tiptoe into a tiny world where even the smallest whiskers can make the biggest adventures. Tonight's story is called The Hungry Mouse, and it begins with a teeny squeak in the quiet corner of a big, creaky house. Ready? Let's go. Brah. In the quietest part of an old wooden house, where the floorboards creaked and the walls whispered in the wind, there lived a little gray mouse named Miro. His fur was soft as dandelion fluff, and his nose twitched every time he smelled something yummy. Miro was always hungry. Not the grumbly kind of hungry, but curious hungry. Every crumb had a story, and Miro wanted to nibble them all. One rainy morning, as droplets tapped gently on the window pane, Miro peeked out from his tiny hole in the kitchen wall. His whiskers wiggled with excitement. Something delicious was in the air, warm, buttery, and cheesy. His tummy rumbled. "Oh, what's that?" he squeaked softly, his round ears perking up. On the kitchen table sat a golden slice of cheese toast, left forgotten by the little girl who lived in the house. The scent curled through the room like a song. Miro scampered closer, staying low and quiet. He leapt over a pencil, zipped past a sleepy cat's paw. Miss Muffles didn't even stir, and reached the leg of the table. Now came the hard part, the climb. He looked up. The table seemed as tall as the sky, but Miro was brave. He dug his tiny claws into the wooden leg and began to climb slow and steady. Halfway up, he paused to catch his breath. His belly rumbled louder. "I'm coming, little cheese," he whispered. At the top, he poked his head over the edge and gasped. There it was, the cheese toast, shining like a treasure, still warm, its edges crispy. But just as Miro crept forward, a gust of wind whooshed through the window. The napkin under the toast fluttered, and the toast slid right off the table. Plop! It landed on the floor near Miss Muffles's bed. Miro froze. The cat's ear twitched. Her tail gave a sleepy flick. "Oh no," he whispered, heart pounding. Miss Muffles sniffed, then rolled over, still asleep. Miro raced down, faster than ever. But when he reached the floor, the toast was gone. He followed the smell, nose low, around the table, past the cupboard, under the chair. A crumb, then another. A trail! Someone or something had taken it. Miro's eyes sparkled with curiosity. This wasn't just breakfast anymore. It was the beginning of an adventure. "Who took my toast?" he squeaked bravely. "I must find out." And with a wiggle of his nose and a twitch of his tail, the little hungry mouse set off, crumb by crumb, into the big unknown. The crumb trail zigzagged across the kitchen floor, like a path made just for Miro. Each crumb was a clue, and each nibble filled his tiny tummy with courage. Miro paused beside the cupboard, sniffed the air, and pressed his ear to the floor. There was a faint scritch-scratch, then silence. Someone had taken his toast, and they were clever not a crumb out of place after here. He followed the trail under the door leading outside. The wooden door was closed, but Miro knew a secret. There was a crack near the bottom, just wide enough for him to squeeze through. He took a deep breath, wriggled his way out, and tumbled into the garden. The garden smelled of wet earth, mint, and marigolds. Raindrops hung from the leaves like shiny beads. Miro's paws sunk slightly into the soft dirt as he tiptoed through the garden path. Then he saw them 3 tiny footprints in the mud. They were smaller than his, almost dainty. He sniffed the next crumb. It was fresh. The thief hadn't gone far. Suddenly, a blur of brown dashed behind a flower pot. "Hey!" Miro called out. "Wait!" He scampered after the shadow, squeezing past tulip stems and hopping over puddles. His heart thudded with excitement. He wasn't mad, he was curious. Who else in the world loved cheese toast? Behind the flower pot, Miro found a tiny tunnel in the dirt. It looked recently dug. At the edge of the hole sat a curled-up crust part of his toast. Miro tiptoed closer. "Hello?" From the tunnel peeked a pair of shiny eyes. Then, a timid voice. "Two didn't know it was yours." Out stepped a tiny brown field mouse, even smaller than Miro. Her fur was speckled like cinnamon, and she clutched a cheese crumb between her paws. "I'm Tilly," she squeaked. "I was so hungry, and it smelled so good." Miro's whiskers twitched kindly. "I'm Miro, and it did smell amazing, didn't it?" Tilly nodded. "I only took a little. I left crumbs in case someone wanted to follow." Miro blinked. "You wanted to be found?" She smiled shyly. "I hoped someone else loved cheese toast too." Miro laughed softly. "I think we're going to be great friends." They sat beside the flower pot, splitting the crust into neat little pieces. As they munched in the cozy silence, raindrops pattered above like a lullaby. But just as Miro licked his paw, there was a strange noise, a rustling behind the garden shed, a low, squeaky growl. Tilly's ears twitched. "Did you hear that?" Miro nodded. Alert. Something's coming. And it smelled hungry, too. Together, they scampered into Tilly's tunnel, hearts racing. The garden adventure was far from over. Miro and Tilly squeezed into the little tunnel, their paws thumping gently against the packed dirt as they scurried. The squeaky growl behind them faded, but their hearts still pounded like tiny drums. Tilly led the way, her tail flicking as she moved. The tunnel opened up into a snug, underground room made of leaves, twigs, and moss. A tiny acorn lamp glowed in the corner. Tilly had poked fireflies inside a hollow shell. The glow was soft and golden, like starlight. "Wow," Miro whispered, looking around. "You live here?" Tilly nodded proudly. "I built it myself. It's safe and warm, and I keep extra crumbs in that jar." She pointed to a clean jam jar filled with tiny food pieces, seeds, crumbs, even a single candy sprinkle. "I've never seen anything like it," Miro said, curling up on a bed of cotton fluff. Suddenly, a soft knock sounded on the tunnel wall. Miro jumped. "Who's that?" Tilly padded over and pulled aside a leaf curtain. In peeked two garden creatures, a fuzzy bumblebee with bent wings and a shy green grasshopper. "Oh, hello, Buzz." "Hi, Kip," Tilly waved. Buzz the bumblebee buzzed sleepily. "We heard the cheese toast smelled amazing. Was that you?" Miro smiled. "It was. Well, it was mine. Then it became Tilly's. Now I guess it's everyone's." Kip the grasshopper nodded, his big eyes blinking. "Smell's still floating over the garden. Even the crows are sniffing around." Tilly frowned. "We should be careful. Not everyone shares nicely." "Crows?" Miro squeaked. "Big ones?" Buzz nodded slowly. "Big beaks. Big bellies." Just then, boom! Something heavy landed above their tunnel. Dust shook loose from the ceiling. "Uh-oh," whispered Kip. "Crows," said Tilly. "They must have followed the scent." Everyone froze. Outside, the crows cawed and strutted. One of them poked its beak into the grass. Another started tugging at the flowers near the tunnel entrance. "We can't stay here," Buzz said. "They'll dig us out." Miro stood tall. "We need a plan. Something clever." Tilly's eyes lit up. "We can trick them. There's an old teacup behind the shed. If we fill it with something strong smelling like mint and garlic, they'll get distracted." Kip rubbed his legs. "I can hop fast. I'll go gather the mint." Buzz fluttered. "And I'll dive bomb them if they get too close." Miro nodded. "And I'll grab the garlic from the garden box." Together, the small team leapt into action. Miro darted across the wet grass, snatched a garlic clove with his teeth, and ran back. Kip brought sprigs of mint, and Buzz stirred everything in the teacup with a blade of grass. When the smell drifted through the air, the crows gagged and squawked. "Ugh! What's that stink?" one cried, flapping away. The others followed, wings flapping madly, leaving only silence behind. Tilly giggled. "Team Crumb wins," Miro beamed. "And we didn't even have to give up our last bit of cheese toast." Buzz buzzed proudly. "We make a good team." As the sun peeked from behind the clouds, Miro looked around at his new friends and whispered, "I came looking for breakfast, but I think I found something better." After the crows flew away, the garden felt peaceful again. The sun stretched its golden fingers across the soil, drying the puddles and warming Miro's tiny paws. He, Tilly, Buzz, and Kip sat outside the tunnel nibbling leftover crumbs and laughing about the stinkiest teacup in the world. I still smell garlic in my whiskers, Kip said, twitching his nose. Buzz buzzed lazily above them. At least the crows won't be back soon. Miro stretched and yawned. What a morning. I think I could nap for a week. Tilly stood and brushed her fur with her paws. Let's take the long tunnel to the berry bush. I've been saving a juicy raspberry for a special guest. Miro's ears perked up. A raspberry? A sweet, sun-warmed raspberry. She grinned. They padded back into the tunnel, which twisted under the garden like a maze of mouse-sized highways. The farther they went, the cooler and darker it became. Tilly lit another acorn lamp with her glow-in-the-dark fireflies. But soon, something felt wrong. The tunnel was too quiet. The air smelled different, like damp stone and sharp roots. Buzz hovered beside Miro. This isn't your usual path, is it? Tilly frowned. No, it isn't. I don't remember this bend. The walls narrowed, and the floor turned slick. A cold wind whooshed past them. Suddenly, crack! The tunnel floor split beneath Miro's paws, and he tumbled down a muddy slide. Weezer! Tilly shrieked and dove after him. Kip and Buzz followed, buzzing and tumbling like a leaf in a storm. Plop, plop, plop. They landed in a dark, echoey chamber. Roots dangled from the ceiling, and strange stones glowed faintly in the walls. The air was thick and still. Where are we? Whispered Tilly. Buzz landed on a rock. This part of the garden feels ancient. Kip tapped a wall with his leg, like nobody's been here in years. Miro's fur bristled. Something was watching them. A deep voice echoed from the shadows. Who disturbs my chamber? Everyone froze. From the far corner, a figure stepped into the light. It was a large, round mole with thick glasses, a dusty vest, and an armful of scrolls. I'm Professor Mudwick, he said, adjusting his spectacles. And you've just tumbled into my library of lost tunnels. Miro blinked. Library? Mudwick nodded proudly. Every tunnel ever dug in this garden has a story. I keep them safe maps, memories, mistakes. Tilly stepped forward. We got lost. We didn't mean to disturb you. Mudwick chuckled kindly. Few ever mean to. But you're here now. Perhaps you'd like to learn the way out? Yes, please, Miro said quickly. But first, Mudwick said, reaching into a scroll tube. I believe you're looking for this tunnel. He unrolled a glowing map lens and swirls that shimmered like morning dew. One red path led back to the raspberry bush. But a second, green path twisted deeper underground. What's down that way? Miro asked. The old mole smiled. The Forgotten Feast. Buzz, Kip, and Tilly gasped. That's just a legend. But Miro's belly gave a loud growl. Maybe, Miro said, eyes twinkling. We should find out. Professor Mudwick gently rolled up the glowing map and tucked it back into his vest pocket. The little group gathered around him, eyes wide with curiosity and whiskers twitching. The Forgotten Feast, the old mole began, was once a celebration held by all the garden creatures. Every critter, big or small, brought a bite of their best food to share. It happened once every full moon until the tunnels shifted, and the way was lost. Buzz buzzed nervously. You mean, no one's found it in years? Mudwick nodded. But you, young Miro, you've awakened something. The path is glowing again. Maybe, just maybe, it's ready to be found. Miro stood a little taller. His tummy rumbled like a tiny thundercloud. Well, said Kip, we've come this far. Let's follow the green path. The friends followed the glowing lines deeper underground. The air smelled earthy and old, like tree bark and memories. Fireflies lit the way, and faint music seemed to echo through the wall-soft flutes, thumps of drums, and the hum of tiny voices singing. After many twists and turns, they reached a wooden archway carved with tiny pictures of nuts, berries, and cheese wheels. Ivy wrapped around the frame like ribbon. Tilly pushed the door gently. Cree. The tunnel opened into a hidden chamber that took their breath away. Mossy tables were set in a circle, each topped with old plates, golden crumbs, and dried flower petals. Lanterns made of snail shells dangled from roots above. In the center, a giant pumpkin carved into a bowl still held a bit of dried honey. "It's beautiful," whispered Tilly. "It's waiting," said Mudwick softly. Miro's eyes sparkled. "We should bring it back." Kip jumped up. "A new forgotten feast. For everyone. Bees, beetles, worms, Ant 7, that rude squirrel from the fence post." Buzz flapped his wings excitedly. "And cheese toast. We have to bring cheese toast." The group hurried out of the tunnel with Mudwick guiding them. When they reached the surface, the sun had begun to set. The garden glowed orange and gold. Miro stood on a rock and squeaked at the top of his lungs. "Gather round, everyone. We found the feast." At first, nothing happened. Then, a beetle poked out from behind a leaf. A rabbit peeked from her den. A frog climbed onto a stone. One by one, creatures came. Buzz zipped through the sky, spreading the news. Kip hopped from bush to bush with berry baskets. Tilly passed out acorn invitations. And Miro? He visited every corner of the garden, offering smiles, stories, and a promise. "No matter how small you are," he said, "there's always a place at our table." That night, as stars blinked into the sky, the garden tunnel glowed again. Lanterns flickered. Laughter echoed. Creatures from all corners gathered, bringing what they could. Nuts, petals, crumbs, even a lick of honey. Miro sat at the head of the mossy table, his paws warm and full. Beside him, Tilly whispered, "You did it." "We did it," Miro replied, smiling wide. "Together." Buzz handed him a tiny plate. On it sat a perfect triangle of golden cheese toast. Miro sniffed it, grinned, and said, "Smells like home." The garden glowed under the moonlight, like a sleepy dream. Tiny firefly lanterns swung gently from leaves, and the mossy table shimmered with crumbs, petals, and puddles of honey. The feast had begun, and it was more magical than anyone had imagined. Miro sat in the center, wrapped in a daisy blanket, his belly full and his heart even fuller. Around him, laughter bubbled like warm tea. Beetles hummed lullabies. Frogs strummed blades of grass. Bees wobbled from flower to flower, singing sweet songs and sneaking sips of clover juice. Tilly passed a plate of crispy thistle chips. "Try these, Miro." He munched happily. "Delicious. Are these dipped in mushroom butter?" "Of course." She winked. "Only the best for the hero of the feast." Buzz buzzed by with a flower hat slightly crooked on his head. "This is the best day ever. Even the grumpy snail is smiling." Kip tumbled past them with a raspberry jelly trail stuck to his legs. "Oops, I might have rolled in the pudding bowl again." Everyone laughed. The feast had turned into a celebration of silliness, sweetness, and sharing. Professor Mudwick sat nearby, adjusting his glasses and sketching notes. "This will go into the great garden history book," he said proudly. "The day the feast was found again." Miro climbed onto a small stone and raised his acorn cup filled with dandelion tea. "Friends," he squeaked. "Tonight, something amazing happened. We all came together not for just food, but for friendship. We shared not only crumbs and berries, but kindness and courage." He looked around at the smiling faces: mice, frogs, bees, snails, beetles, and even the grumpy squirrel, who was now humming softly with a napkin tied around his neck. Miro held up a golden triangle of cheese toast. "So, here's a toast," he said, paws trembling with happiness. "To everyone who helped, everyone who believed, and everyone who came, whether you brought a crumb or a story or just your smile." "To friends," shouted Tilly. "To cheese toast," Buzz buzzed. "To never giving up," Kip added, wiping jelly off his antennae. The crowd clinked their cups, tapped their shells, and thumped their tails. A warm cheer filled the tunnel, echoing all the way to the sleepy garden above. As the fireflies dimmed and the moon rose higher, the guests curled into cozy corners. Tilly rested her head on a bed of moss. Buzz buzzed in slow circles until he snored mid-flight and landed in a buttercup.